Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, fellow panelists. So this is our final panel for the evening on regulatory opportunities and challenges. I think everyone today touched up a little bit about the role of regulators in MoneyTech and in deploying this technology and having the right approach to this. I would like to start off with Faris Al-Obaid. I'll say congratulations on what Tamara has accomplished so far, and congratulations personally on being appointed CEO of Bahrain and Oman, I believe this week. Mabruk. If you would, and I think it would help us all to get just a little briefing about Tamara and let me get this right. Buy now, pay later as a model that's been discussed quite frequently today. We'll start off with you, and I would like you to answer the question of what are your views on the current state of regulations?
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mohammed, for this opportunity, and appreciate for the congratulations.
I think if you just...
Hello?
Is it?
Hello? Hello?
We'll just check.
Hello?
Okay, I think
that's fine. So thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate it for this opportunity. Thanks to Jarida for taking the time to organize such an event in a short time. First off, who is Tamara? So we're a fintech company that started 2 years ago exactly by 3 Saudi co-founders, Abdelmajid Sikhan, Turki bin Zara, and Anil Batin. A lot of people confuse that we're actually a startup, but our growth story is tremendously shocking to the markets. If we look back in 2020, we started with 3 co-founders. Today, where I stand currently, we have footprints in Vietnam, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait early this year, Bahrain, Oman year-end, and Qatar Q1 next year. When we talk about employees, we're more than 300 employees and aggressively growing. If we talk about investment rounds within the company Tamara, Series A, we've made waves, more than $120 million investment, which is one of the biggest Series A fintech investments in the MENA region. Recently, 2 months ago, we closed the Series B of more than $100 million with a validation of PIT joining us within the last round. What is Tamara? Tamara is the leading MENA regional player when it comes to buy now, pay later. It's a facility payment solution which enables customers to split their payments in 3 payments, completely shari'ah compliant and interest-free. The way we operate is fairly simple, or relatively simple. We work directly with merchants, whereby we get a commission from the total invoice, and then the customer pays us on a 3-month period basis, depending on the product that we rolled out in different markets. In terms of regulations, I think we spoke at this at length yesterday and before the conference. As a techpreneur, not even an entrepreneur, techpreneur, the frontiers with regards to tech is greatly advancing on a day-to-day basis. Technology is booming like crazy. What we've seen in the last 2 years since incorporating the concept of Tamara and validating the concept in Saudi Arabia, then moving to UAE, then Kuwait, Bahrain, and so on, is the following. Within each jurisdiction, there's different constraints, right? Some jurisdictions have more advanced knowledge of what's going on in the different markets. Some players actually want to see such technology in order to validate, to look at the different data points and say that, yes, this is a value-add service within the economy. And others are looking and still dabbling slowly within the market sphere itself. If I look at Kuwait, the language that we started with the regulator early this year, when we approached them and voluntarily complied to submit our different data sets, was completely different to where we are today. The learning curve is huge. The team led by Central Bank today is up to par with the language of tech today. They facilitated and really onboarded us to actually accelerate our process to double down in the Kuwaiti markets and provide the tools, facilities, and understanding of how to play the game fairly in a competitive way.
That's great. I mean, we've been hearing how the regulators here in Kuwait have been up to speed on this in terms of fintech. I would like to turn to Khaled Al Rashed, CEO of Taqneen Law Firm. يمكن a lot of the speakers today can't really criticize regulators as much, but maybe from a law background, what's your take on regulations in Kuwait? Are we at speed? Are we a bit late to the game? Or how do you see it?
Well, I believe it's quite vague when you look at the regulations in Kuwait. So it's vague because there is no proper fintech strategy from the regulators. So having the first fintech instructions or regulations was issued by CBK in 2018. And if you look at these instructions from 2018 till date, you will see a real, let's say, weak performance from the regulators. So if you take an example, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, both of them started to regulate fintechs in 2018. In the first 3 years, 2018 to 2021, where we witnessed the pandemic, you will see CBK licensed only 2 fintech companies. One of them didn't physically exist at that time, and this is a red flag. When you go to Saudi Arabia and look at their regulations in the same period, 2018 to 2021, you will find more than 80 fintech companies were licensed. Most of them, or let's say, all these 80 plus fintech companies are operating in 5 different fields, let's say. Infrastructure for digital banking, lending, payment service providers. When you look at the companies were licensed in Kuwait from 2018 till date, all of them falls under the same umbrella, payment service provider. I believe with the current digital transformation era that we are witnessing, innovation is a driver, and this must be led by the regulators with a proper fintech strategy.
Thank you, Khaled. I would like to turn to Paul. I think the need for a clearer fintech strategy is necessary, and just on what Khaled touched upon, I would like to get your opinion on how can Kuwait grow more companies in this regulatory sandbox, maybe across a different under more than one umbrella, from a strategy perspective. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to speak at this event. So I think on regulation, it's always a difficult question, right? On the one hand, you want to encourage innovation, open the market. On the other, you want to be prudent. You want to be mindful of market stability, consumer protection, and all the various other policy issues that are important. But when we look at other jurisdictions and how they've evolved their fintech regulations, there's certainly, I think, a lot of interesting lessons that can be applied in Kuwait. I think one of the benefits of being prudent is you can always look to others and how they've experienced their journeys and really pick what's worked in various different countries. So if we think about Kuwait, and firstly, I commend the CBK on the regulation developments that have happened. Obviously, being here today with all the individuals in this room, it's clear that there's a thriving ecosystem. Nevertheless, what can be done to further develop the ecosystem in Kuwait? I think firstly, shifting the mindset from a competitive threat towards partnership models. Very much we see fintechs being a collaborative partner for incumbents in the financial services sector, and really looking to how fintechs can plug into those value chains, into those ecosystems. And that's not only in Kuwait. I think Kuwait benefits from many financial institutions that have footprints around the region. So we're not talking about a market opportunity just in Kuwait, but also market opportunities that exist outside of Kuwait as well, and really understanding how the regulator can play a role to encourage that collaboration as well. The second aspect in terms of further developing, particularly the sandbox initiative that you said, is really around providing clarity on navigating rules. So I think one of the points you mentioned is what is the status of regulation in Kuwait? whilst there have been developments, I think there's certainly a lot of potential to provide greater clarity. And there are some important questions around whether you want to have rules-based regulations or principles-based. So, providing clarity in terms of what entrants can and cannot do, but also providing a bit of room to innovate within that regulatory framework. The other part I would highlight is, it's often easy to just look at the regulator and say, we need to focus on regulations or regulatory development. But actually, it's a broader question that is really around the VC ecosystem itself and providing the funding, the innovation, the ideas that ultimately spur fintechs and the, if you like, provide the genesis of where a lot of these ideas come from. And I think we had some great discussions today as well. So it's really looking at how the central bank as a regulator can work with other stakeholders in the ecosystem, policy advocates, funding sources, incubators, academia, to look at the bigger picture as well. Ultimately, the sandbox is a venue, it's a vehicle, but we really need to maximize the funnel coming into the sandbox to really increase chances of actually graduating and ultimately building successful fintechs for the future.
I think, do you agree with that?
Basically, what? I mean, the estimate.
Hello? Yes. All right. So just from my basic knowledge and all the reading I've been doing lately, there's been Saudi, for example, has launched its a fintech strategy 2030, I believe. Is that something that could help just to touch up on the having a written strategy for the industry for Kuwait? Is that something worth looking into?
So I think it's something that would certainly help. But the difficult part is then actually getting the whole ecosystem to actually move forward together. It's very easy to put out strategy, put out a report, and it's an important basis to bring everyone on the same page. Yeah. There's certainly a role to be played to, identify where the funding's going to come from to promote that sector, B, bring to light the opportunities and the ideas that exist. We talked about that, I think, in the last discussion. There are a lot of ideas here.
Yes.
And it's really about how you bring that whole system together. But certainly a strategy to bring everyone on the same page and set the direction would be very helpful indeed.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to loop in Asber. I'd like to get your take on this conversation. My question to you is, what role should regulators... I'm aware that TAP is operational in several markets. So just based off of your experience, what role should regulators play in deploying such technology?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think given the fact that we have a presence in over 9 geographies within the region, the regulatory landscape is variable, I think. And what I see within the region is there has to be subject matter experts within the fintech industry to be part of that regulatory ecosystem. It adds more value, integration, it supports the fintech, given the fact that fintechs are growing quite dramatically within the region as a whole. We also see that even within TAP itself, there are collaborations taking place within Buy Now Pay Later. So to bring that collaboration together convolutes the regulatory framework even more for a regulator to then be able to, continue to manage such relationships. I was an ex-regulator, so I decided to come out of that regulatory field and come into the industry to actually understand the ecosystem more. So what I'm seeing now, though, within the region as a whole, is that you're getting subject matter experts coming into the regulatory landscape. You're finding, specifically in regions such as Saudi Arabia, even within the UAE, the dynamics of how regulation is evolving is a lot quicker. And unfortunately, we're trying to keep up with the dynamic change on those regulations. I think if I bring it back to Kuwait, what I am finding is that the central bank is they're more open for dialogue. I think they're being more proactive, understanding the business models, giving us that flexibility as to where draft regulations have been issued this year. On the 2018 e-payments regulation, I see there's a lot more innovation around cybersecurity risk, information technology, the frameworks coming around, which I think will only continue to evolve.
Thanks. Since TAP has been operating in 9 markets, we've seen all these sandboxes popping up in the region over the past couple of years, especially in the Gulf. My question to you, Azra, is what can we do to attract more participants and graduate more businesses? In your opinion?
I think the regulatory sandbox, I think, is quite important for startups. It gives them the platform for them to test their products, to be more innovative within the growth. But I was speaking with my fellow panelists that it's interesting where, like Tap and Tamara, we're on a different journey because we're not really seen as a startup, but at the same time, we're innovating our products as well. So when such entities come into the regulatory sandbox, they don't know who we are or where we actually fit within that. Then maybe you'd like to agree on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump in, Mohammed. I appreciate that for the point. I think that's really brilliant. I think it's always good to be reminded that for Tamara specifically, we're 2 years old. We just celebrated our 2nd year. And when we talk to different stakeholders, whether it's banks, regulators in different jurisdictions, they talk to us as if we're a big global bank operating for the last 20 years. Because of the data sets that we have, today if we look at the numbers, we have more than 3 million plus registered customers on Tamara platform. We work with more than 4,000 merchants and aggressively onboarding month to month multiple merchants across the GCC. We work with the likes of Shein, Nemshi, IKEA, Tanagra, all the big players. And they all have an appetite to work with Tamara, specifically a BNPL player that has a value-added service, that has a seamless experience for customers, and that's very clear in the sense of how we operate our business, whether it's settlement with regards to the merchants or the ease of payment and flexibility and the shari'ah compliant perspective for the customer. So for us, when we talk to regulators, our playbook is the following. We start operating at a cross-border level. Our the way of operating is cross-border. Then we engage regulators in different jurisdictions. We incorporate in that jurisdiction itself and go to local acquiring mode. When we have this discussion, it's always, okay, join the sandbox. But we're relatively mature to join the sandbox. So where does the regulator fit a fintech or an entrepreneur or a new product that has a strong growth and a strong trajectory? When we're way too advanced for the local players to understand where we're going and what we're doing, it's hard to actually triangulate and say, you know what, you're a startup. So you're going to abide by the same rules as a startup that's not capitalized yet and that's not operating in the economy itself. While we already operate at a cross-border level and then integrate and engage heavily the regulators at a local level.
Would you say that maybe, I don't want to put words into your, but would you say that because of the delay someone as the size of Tamara having to go through the sandbox framework due to the lack of maybe regulations are not live yet, maybe it's at an early stage?
Okay, so let me try to triangulate that answer. Because of my visibility in the different markets, whether it's Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, what I've been seeing in the last couple of months, traveling in the different jurisdictions, is the following. All regulators are talking to each other, and they're sharing different data sets. So whether we talk to one regulator, there's the same understanding that these guys are on a different level. For example, they're more mature, they have XYZ customers, they have XYZ merchants. This is what they are. So I think the discussion that we need to have is, okay, there's the sandbox, but we should also have a sandbox plus for fintechs that are a bit more mature than the traditional concept of startups.
Clear. That's very good. I want to just circle back to Khaled. We've been talking about all this regulation. So the question is, that we're seeing that there's some challenges happening. So does sound regulation always equal strict regulation?
I believe no. Especially with the current situation, we always need exceptions. Flexibility should be the main point when it comes to regulations, flexible regulations. So the sandbox is a great example of the flexible regulations. Simply, sandboxes is a controlled spaces where they implement flexible regulations to test these new innovative products. And by the way, this concept isn't new. Originally, it was used in the computer field when they carry out technical tests related to software development. Bank of England in 2015 adopted this model when they started to regulate fintechs, and it works well. This is only one kind of many other flexible regulations models, let's say. You can see the agile regulation, sunset rules, and many others. So it's important to find the best exception where flexibility is the main point.
Staying with you, Khaled, what do regulators need to do to stay ahead of operators? Right now, what we're hearing from Tamara and TAP is they're kind of moving at a faster pace than the regulator is kind of complying. So in your opinion, what do regulators need to do? What kind of flexibility maybe they need to introduce to be ahead of these operators?
Well, Carl mentioned a good point where it's not only about the regulators. We need to have a proper fintech strategy where we include all the related government authorities, either CITRA, the Kuwait Investment Authority, even the universities. So it's a huge plan to build a new ecosystem and drive change to the mindsets, encourage the community much more. And then I believe we can start being ahead. Recording, tracking, and having transparency with the data related in this ecosystem is also an important thing. Like we lack today in Kuwait, there is no proper place to look for proper data related to fintechs and regulations and so on, where you can find in other jurisdictions an ongoing report issued to each one.
Same question to you, Paul. We've heard Faris talking about maybe a sandbox plus. So the question to you is, what do regulators need to do to stay ahead of operators?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's really difficult because it's moving so fast. But just a few things. I think you need to engage with the industry. It's very difficult to guess from the outside in what's happening unless you engage. So industry dialogue is critical. The sandbox provides an amazing opportunity to get a real close-in view of what is happening around innovation. But actually even into policy design. So when we think about regulatory development, before actually implementation, doing consultation, understanding where the industry wants to head, how the market participants see the industry is important. The second point, now this is where I think Kuwait has a great opportunity, is cross-regulatory engagement. So regulators love to engage with each other. They don't necessarily compete always. So learning what's happened in other markets, what have been some of the lessons learned that other regulators wish they would have known, what have been some of the successes, and bringing that back to Kuwait. So speaking with regulators around the world, and the CBK does that obviously is a natural part of its activities. And then lastly, and again, this is very difficult, but there's an element of upgrading the skills and capabilities within the regulator. And I think we had a great point around having more involvement of subject matter experts, both in regulatory development, but also in terms of monitoring, engagement, and so forth. But actually within the regulator themselves, upskilling, understanding some of the important concepts around fintech and the broader fintech industry is going to be critical to be an effective regulator going forward.
Thanks. I'd like just to propose the question to Azra as well. That is, I mean, since you've been a regulator yourself, is there something? I mean, I know we tried reaching out to CBK, the regulator, to be part of this conference today, but maybe you could up the question to you: what needs to be done for them to be ahead, or for at least fintech in Kuwait to move at the same pace?
I think it is moving. I think they're on the right path. I think culturally wants to be aligned with the draft regulations. I think they've already got a fintech hub, which again is specifically there to nurture and basically, I think, re-emphasize their strategic initiative on fintechs. You've heard today that we've got the open banking platform coming up. You've got a lot more buy now, pay laters coming their way. I think I agree with a lot of my co-speakers today. It's got to evolve a lot more collaboration. I'd like to see some industry matter experts also engage with the central banks to basically be able to support them in the way that, how the international, or where are we coming across, because payment services regulation internationally is just expanding dynamically. For me, AML regulation or sanctions regulation used to be the core fundamental aspect of any compliance regulation. In today's era, data privacy, data protection, cybersecurity risk, cybersecurity framework seems to exceed. While it's on par to other regulations, it seems that when any regulator is looking at any fintech coming in, the first thing they ask you is not who's your compliance officer, who's your CISO. So, that's a dynamic of difference in communications that you're now having. So I think a lot more collaboration. I see it happening. I see in different regions where, again, TAP is in the process of collaborating with PASI. So again, we're also going through that in KYC digitalization. So the journey is happening. I mean, it'd be so interesting to see us having the same conversation next year and seeing now we've moved ahead about it.
We look forward to having that conversation next year, definitely. I'll transition to Faris real quick. Today, on the morning panel, Dalal Rais was hopeful that the, in terms of time frame of having open banking regulations put in place in Kuwait is by next year or by 2 years max. I believe Tamara is currently in the Kuwaiti sandbox. I would like to get your when do you think we'd be live?
Okay, so thanks for that question. Let me reverse it and try to re-engineer the answer. First off, I'd like to agree with all the panelists, Fall and Azra. I think what we need to see from regulators, specifically in Kuwait, is tapping into industry experts that are in the field, that have specific data sets within their subject matter expertise, whether it's Tamara or different players in different verticals. And actually, we subjugated ourselves early this year when we entered the market in Kuwait to central bank to share with them different data sets and to show them how we're capitalizing on different markets. And this is on a voluntary basis. And that goes as far as saying that, we want to work with the regulator. We are working with the regulators in the different industry or different jurisdictions, whether it's Saudi, Bahrain, and so on. But what we don't want to see is a quick jerk reaction with regards to deploying regulations in different industries. Okay? What does that do? If we look at it globally speaking in the BNPL space, those jurisdictions that set out a clear guideline or clear BNPL regulation, they shot themselves in the foot. Once again, we have to look back a bit. BNPL is a relatively new industry. And what we're proposing to regulators all across the different jurisdictions that we're working with is we are partners. We are here to share our information, to share the data set, and to grow together. Once you feel we've reached at a stage that we're too big to handle, regulate us. And let's talk and let's have a two-way flow discussion of how best to regulate, protect us, protect you, and protect the local jurisdictions. For Tamara's specific sake, we are highly capitalized, or relatively highly capitalized. So the way we operate entering a new market, whether it's Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, or Qatar, is we come with our own money, our investor money, right? So we had 2 rounds that are incredibly big. And there's no risk at a macro or micro economy. In what sense? So today, merchants are getting the full value of their invoice minus our commission, depending on the agreement that we have, once a week, bi-weekly, whatever it is, depending on their tier also. And the customers are getting the facility of paying their invoice interest-free, shari'ah compliant, in split prepayments. The customer interacts with us, so it's a B2B2C kind of model. There's no risks at a capital market exposure level. So we're taking 100% of the risk as a BNPL player. So we're trying to educate the regulators and tell them, you know what? Tap into us. Tap into the know-how of our industry. Tap into the data sets that we have, and let's work together to grow this industry and regulate it correctly as per the local markets, right? You can't take something from outside and say, you know what? Now, this is what's going to be in Kuwait. It's not making any sense. Let's adapt the regulations to the local markets, and that makes just more sense to the regulators and to the players that are working within this field.
Thank you. Khaled, I'll ask the same question to you. When do you expect to see fintech regulation seeing the light of day here in Kuwait, or you can clearer fintech regulation?
It will be good if regulators understand well what sandboxes are, what's the purpose, the objectives, advantages, risks behind these sandboxes, and having, as mentioned, a proper fintech strategy with initiatives and encouraging the community, universities, other government authorities will be the only way to develop properly on how solid the fundamental ecosystem.
So thank you.